Okay, so it's 8:03, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Julia here from Quad Education. We're an admissions consulting company dedicated to helping deserving students get into the school of their dreams. Really excited that you've all joined us here for this webinar today. We've got a really exciting one all about college profile development and building your candidacy. Make sure. And we're going to be looking also at how admissions are decided after your application submission. So before I introduce the panelists, I'm just going to go ahead and discuss the agenda that we have for today and just a couple little housekeeping things afterwards. So first, we'll talk about what happens after you submit your primary application, how applications are reviewed, what to do once you've submitted your applications, tips to submitting. Oh, sorry. I think this is going a little rogue here, sorry. Tips to boost your chances of getting into your dream school. And then after, we'll have a designated questions and answer section. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, we ask that you either type them in the chat box or just hang on to them until we get to that designated Q&A section. And then our panelists are happy to answer those for you. Another thing I want to flag is that this presentation will be emailed out after tomorrow morning. So once the presentation is done, if you want to review it or kind of go back and just, if you missed something, you want to take a look at it again, we will be emailing it out to all attendees. So stay tuned for that. Alrighty, I'll go ahead and get our panelists, let our panelists introduce themselves. Apologies, Pam, your picture did not make it in the webinar, but as you can see, this is Pam and Meisha. Pam, take it away. Oh, Pam, I think you're on mute.
Whoops, sorry about that. I'm very excited to be here tonight with all of you. Thank you so much for coming. I'm a former admissions officer at both Harvard and Stanford. I went to Harvard for my undergrad and did my PhD postdoc and was a clinical faculty member at Stanford, also on the admissions committee there. So that's some of my background.
Hi, everyone. My name is Meisha. I've been with Quad for a bit over a year now. I did my undergrad degree at Columbia University studying neuroscience, and I went on to do my PhD at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. And now I'm a scientist working in biotech, but I really have a passion for mentoring students at different stages of their career, especially at the college level, to get into the school of their dreams. So I'm very happy to be here today to talk, to continue my mentorship and talk to you guys about how this whole college admissions process takes place.
Amazing. Thanks so much, guys. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and get started. First, let's discuss what happens after you submit your primary application.
Yeah, so it's usually a three-step process. It really depends on the school that you apply to. But after you submit your application, you submit that big, press that big red button, and you feel at ease, it's off to another side. It's off to the college side of things. So the admissions officers will review your application. Depending on the school, they will offer you an interview. And lastly, there will be a decision made about your application. Now, the timeline varies whether you apply early action, early decision, or regular decision. So there's no set amount of months that it will take between each of these steps. But overall, this is the general schema.
So depending on the college,
Sorry.
That's okay. I was just going to add that what happens once you hit or click submit is your application goes out to different territory managers. So different schools have different ways of calling the people who are in charge of your application. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper. Julie was just giving us a heads up of what's to come. But essentially, once you hit those territory managers, everybody within their little pod or group starts to look at the applicants within their area. So for the most part, depending on the school, so some schools like Cornell don't do this, but for the most part, many of the Ivy Leagues and Stanford turn to territory managers, who are experts. So meaning a lot of students ask questions about what happens if my admissions officer doesn't know that my school doesn't offer Calculus BC. They actually will know that because they are experts in their region, and they often travel to the high schools. So I used to travel to high schools and get to know the counselors at your school, the principal at your school, as well as the students and what the school does and doesn't have. They tend to know a whole lot about your area. So meaning if you are in a rural area, we're not going to expect that you have the same opportunities that someone in a more urban area might have. We may not expect that you're doing hackathons the way that other people are doing, if that's the case. So they really get to know your region. They really get to know the opportunities available to you, and you're being evaluated based on your local context. So that's really important in admissions because context drives all the decision making, as we'll see in the next couple of slides.
So how are applications reviewed? Well, the first thing to keep in mind is different colleges have different levels of competitiveness and diversity when it comes to the applicant pool, which is all the different students who have submitted an application. You may think that you are a perfect match for the school, and while that may be true, it really depends on the other folks who have applied at the same time as you. So just before we start, just make sure you keep in mind that the whole college process is very competitive, and I would say don't take it personally because it's not a reflection of whether you deserve to be in the school or not. It's more a reflection of how the admissions process works and your peers at that time.
So like I was saying, you're very much being evaluated based on your local context. And what students don't realize is that when we are selecting a class, we are selecting a diversity of applicants to the class, not within a particular student. So a lot of times students feel that they need to be well-rounded and diverse within themselves, but they do not. Because what we're aiming for is a class that's diverse, meaning there's a diversity of locations that people grew up in. So that's your local context, your lived experience, that's the buzzword for the past year in light of the Supreme Court decision striking down race. And what we're looking for are lots and lots and lots of different students with many different interests to fulfill our mission as a school. So as Maisha was saying, don't take it personally because there are things called institutional priorities. So institutional priorities means that, let's say that one year, this actually happened at Georgia Tech, a school decides to create a neuroscience major. But in the previous years, they may not have had that. So they weren't really looking for those students. But in the year that they create this department, they're looking hard and going out and recruiting and hoping to get really strong candidates for that new major or new initiative or thing that they're building or hoping for. There's no real way for you to know what these institutional priorities are, but they drive the entire admissions process. So that's kind of the invisible hand that's going on in the background. And that's what we mean when we say don't take it personally, because you could be a really excellent candidate, but for whatever reason, in the year that you're applying to that particular school, they might be looking for someone to fulfill a particular demographic. So that's what we mean here when we say that the student body matters, and that's what we're looking for in terms of fulfilling our missions.
Right, and these external factors are exactly what Pam was referring to right now, that, most of the time, the reason for you personally not getting admitted is because of these external factors that we or you as an applicant won't be aware of at the time that you're applying, and probably won't be aware of in the future either. It's all kind of internally based and assessed. So yes, just driving home the fact that because of the diversity, the competitiveness, and external factors that are not stated clearly, it's possible that you may not get into every college that you apply to, and that's okay.
Okay, let's touch on how applications are reviewed. So let's lift the veil and see what happens behind the scenes.
So the first thing that drives admission is looking at your academics. So these are the foundation of admissions, and we're trying to consider your high school GPA, your AP, IB, A-level, whatever curriculum you have in your local context, as well as the overall difficulty. So meaning if your school has 22 AP classes and you took 15, then you're maxing out what humanly possible. but did you go above and beyond? And were there other opportunities available to you? I live in California. We have dual enrollment in community college. It's very common. So things like that we're considering. However, if those things are not available to you, we don't expect that you should go out and get those opportunities or move to a school down the street just because it's got something that your school doesn't. So students often get very worried when they hear about this, but we're really evaluating you based on your high school context. Then the second thing that we look at is your personal attributes. So these are evidence, or they play out through your extracurriculars and how you choose to spend your time. The way that you choose to spend your time outside of the classroom tells us a lot about you and what you value. So if you're really into robotics, that tells us that maybe you're really into problem solving and creativity. And, you know, a lot of students who do engineering, right, get involved in Science Olympiad or robotics as an activity. So it tells us a lot about your interests. It's kind of strange if we're looking at your extracurricular list and it doesn't really align with the things that you're saying that you want to study. So we usually recommend that those two things should align. And then in terms of the college, every single school has a mission and value statement. They sometimes can sound very similar, but if you pay attention, there are schools that, for example, the Jesuit universities, they often care a lot about the social good. So they're into educating the whole person, and that's their mission. So that's going to look very different than, say, at Stanford, where we're really into the cutting edge of technology. We're all about pushing boundaries, and those are our values. So you want to pay attention to that because the way that you position yourself should match with what the college is looking for. That's what we determine and say is a good fit. That's another admissions buzzword. And then your extracurriculars should align with what the colleges are saying to show your fit with that institution.
At the end of the day, you know, all these factors are super important, and it's very important, like Pam said, to make sure that you show that you're a good fit. But I guess a more general statement, when you ask what do colleges want to see, they want to see that you really made an effort, that you really took advantage of what your high school did offer, whether it be AP, IB courses or honors level courses, what extracurriculars you took advantages of. They really want to see, with what you had, what did you do, and how did you make an effort to stand out? How did you contribute to your high school community and the community at large? So it's really important to make sure that you can prove and really demonstrate how you are someone who takes initiative, you have great work ethic, that you really care about, you know, making a difference, or care about showing colleges that you will be an important member of their future community as well. So there are different ways to do that, of course, but I guess at the core, colleges really want to see that you made a concerted effort throughout your high school career.
So ultimately, like I was saying before, we're looking for students who are going to align with our mission, our vision, and our core values. So these mission and vision and core values come from the very top, so being the president and the board of trustees of the university. And in general, what we're looking for are students who aren't just going to sit in their rooms and take classes and get good grades. At the very, very top colleges, all students can do that, but we're really, there are very diverse and amazing opportunities at many of the top schools. So what they want to see and what we're trying to recruit are students who are going to come and take advantage of all of those amazing resources. So who will interact with our faculty. A lot of them are Nobel Prize winning and will be a joy for the faculty to teach, who are going to be really involved in our communities. We're looking for students, when colleges ask about the community essay, that's often a community essay, they're really asking, so outside of the classroom, what will you contribute? What diverse perspective will you bring? What new cool thing are you going to bring to our student body so that everybody has, you know, a much better experience? And what conversation partner will you be in our classrooms and beyond? So we're looking not only for academic excellence, that's a given, but all of your lived diverse experiences, your ability to make an impact in the communities around you, so through your leadership abilities, and then how you've made an impact in your community and given back in your community will likely indicate how you'll perform in ours.
If you have, let's say, like activities or lived experiences and maybe not the highest grades, do you think that would like trump and like get you a better chance of admission rather than somebody that just has those high grades?
I'll answer that first, and Maisha, feel free to jump in and fill in for me. I would say that we're looking, when we say that there's holistic admissions, we're looking at things like, how do you spend your time? So I've had students who've started their own companies and then sold the IP to Google or done something amazing like that. So in those cases, I would say, well, there's a reason why maybe the grades in the testing weren't so high, because you're spending all of your time obsessively doing this other thing. So that showcases to us your grit and your tenacity in other ways. So we need some context. So we're looking for the entire picture, and that's what they mean by holistic admissions is, how are you spending your time? Like, what is it that you're doing? If grades are not your thing, then what is your thing? You know, where have you been spending your passions?
Amazing. Thanks for the context there. Alrighty, let's touch into how applications are actually reviewed.
So here we're going to talk about two of those items, but before that, I'll just briefly say, of course, one of the most important things that will be reviewed is your personal statement. So that's something that you really want to craft and share with people in your life to make sure that it really reflects who you are, make sure that it doesn't have any typos, make sure that it is showcasing your efforts in your career thus far. So your GPA, your personal statement. So another big one, as you must be familiar with, is the SAT or the ACT score, so standardized testing. In the recent years, especially post-pandemic, many schools have switched to standardized testing optional or testing blind. You may have heard that starting from this year, a lot of schools are actually reverting back to requiring standardized test scores. So do keep in mind that you definitely want to, if a school that you're applying to does require these scores, you do want to spend a significant amount of time preparing for these exams, taking practice tests, trying to take the tests multiple times if you feel like that's what's right for you, preparing early in your high school career. So just note that this is one of the things that can really help you stand out, from someone who may have a very similar portfolio to you. But also keep in mind that this doesn't have to be the end all be all. If you find that you don't score as well as you would like to, there are still other parts in your application package that can kind of make up for it or boost your application.
So aside from your testing, some schools conduct optional interviews. So they're often given where the applicant has alumni available to them. And I would say that if you have the opportunity to speak to an alumni interviewer, they're really eager to speak to prospective candidates. That's why they signed up. It's a totally volunteer position. They're very proud. They're really happy about their schools, and they really want to meet you and just tell you all the great things about their experience. So remember that. I know it's very nerve-wracking, but they actually are coming from a very good place. They genuinely want you to come to their school. They want to tell you how great it is. They want you to ask them questions about their experience. So it's a really good way to give an admissions officer a better idea of who you are as a person, because we can't potentially interview 50,000 candidates, but our alumni interviewers can. And so it gives some additional context and highlights your personal voice through the admissions process, because when we're reading a file, we really only have what's on the page, so what you've written to us. But we rely on our interviewers as well as your teachers to tell us what you're like when they meet you. So I would say that I know it's really nerve-wracking. It's very stressful, but if you can, I would definitely sign up to meet the interviewer. When I was interviewing for Harvard, I actually got along really well with my interviewer, and we still keep in touch. We're Facebook friends from when I was a very young student. So they can be a really great resource to you as you continue your educational journey too.
Okay, so now let's touch on what to do once you've submitted your application.
Okay, step one is kind of fun. It's congratulate yourself. This college application package is big. It has so many steps. It takes years to formulate. It takes, blood, sweat, and tears. So number one is really applaud yourself on completing this kind of daunting task. Number two, next most important thing is to register for these online applicant portals. This is really important because this is how the schools are going to be communicating with you. So admissions officers on the other side will be reaching out to you using these portals. So make sure you have a spreadsheet where you have try to be as organized as you can, where you have all your passwords, all the different links to the school portals, etc., and have all the documents that maybe you'll need in the future, any additional documents you think the schools might need before giving you offers. Just have everything prepared in one place and ready to go so that there are no barriers in the way between you and any possible acceptance.
So another really, really important part of the application package are your supplementary essays. So every school has different essay supplements. Some of them are really fun, and it should indicate to you the values of the college. So U Chicago is really famous for their quirky but kind of tough essay questions. So it should be an indication to you what it might be like and what they're thinking about and what they're looking for. Stanford has 8 little essays. And again, we've had them for a long time, and we're trying to communicate to students what we're looking for. We're looking for quirky, irreverent students who will come and kind of break the rules. It's very much a Silicon Valley mentality. So that gets reflected in the essays that they ask. So these are things that I would say some of them are optional, but they're never really optional. You should probably complete them because they really want to get to know you. You want to think about each supplemental essay as a way to flex your personality. So there are very many different parts of you, and each one should be a way for you to say to the college, here's how I fit with you in these ways, right? So that when an admissions officer is reading the file, they're saying yes, yes, and yes, meaning you're a really good fit for what we're looking for. So that's part of it. There are other supplementary application documents. For example, if you're submitting an arts portfolio or a music or some other kind of portfolio, to pay attention to the deadlines. Stanford is a school that requires them 2 weeks earlier than every other school. We're very unusual in that way. And then other things to keep in mind, especially now, because in this past semester, the seniors have been slinking a little bit into senioritis, but you really want to try to keep your grades up. I know it's been a tough, long slog, but it's actually really important. And if the grades do slip, you'll get a little message from us saying, hey, when you submitted your application, this is what we saw. However, now in the spring of senior year, we're seeing this. So they have a kind of strongly worded message that they send out. So meaning they can rescind it if they see something, but in most cases, they probably won't. But it's just a heads up to say, please stay on track.
All right. If this is something that applies to you, definitely apply for financial aid and look into scholarships that may be applicable. It's never too late to find some sort of scholarship that you think you might be eligible for. And if financial aid is something that you will be needing, definitely apply. Make sure you have your FAFSA application all good to go. You can reach out to your counselors or your high school counselors or your pod counselors or other mentors in your life to help you with these applications. It's definitely nice to have something like an external scholarship on your CV for the future and have a little bit of a monetary boost. Next is to schedule that interview, the optional interviews that we discussed earlier that Pam touched upon. So make sure you spend some time where you kind of are in a good headspace, where you'll be like energized and ready to meet this person who will be trying to get a gauge of your personality. Make sure it's not at a time where you're super sleep deprived, or then the day after you've been up till 2 a.m. finishing your AP Lit essay. Try to pick a good time to kind of showcase who you really are. I agree with Pam and about having a good relationship with your interviewer. I remember having a seriously pleasant interview experience. I remember going in thinking, oh my goodness, like I'm going to be, grilled to the T, but it ended up being such a lovely conversation. I think we talked about like our favorite like English novelists and just, why we were excited. So he went to Columbia and he was a physician. I was not pre-med, but even then we found so much in common. It ended up just being a really lovely conversation with someone who you can see as a mentor. So I would say don't think about the interview. Don't go into it thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to be grilled. Think about it as, okay, I'm going to meet someone who has more life experience than me and has been at a place where maybe I can see myself. So I think that's one way to kind of ease into getting geared up for an interview.
So if you do find yourself on a wait list or being deferred, it's common practice to send a lookie or a letter of continued interest or an update letter or a letter of intent for early decision. So these are all actually really, really different letters. So a letter of intent is usually for athletes in the early round, meaning they go through the process a lot earlier, sometimes in the summer before the application process even starts. But for the majority of the applicant pool, you might be facing a deferral or wait list. So a lot of students get really down about this, but remember, you wouldn't be on the wait list or getting deferred if we didn't see something that we really, really, really wanted to admit you for. But for whatever reason, at that time, we just couldn't. There's only so many beds in the school, and we're really trying to figure out who should get one of these spots. But it doesn't mean that we didn't see something that we really, really liked. So I would say that in your letter of interest or continued interest or update letter, you want to try to reiterate or make clearer why you're a really good fit for the school. So go back and look through your materials. And it's really helpful, I think, to get somebody else to look at your materials, because a lot of times when I'm doing this with students, I'll point out to them, but you didn't cover this or this wasn't said. And in their minds, because they're so mired in their own work and in their own essays, they really can't see it. And I'll say, well, I think that now is the time to continue to tell them why these are all good reasons for them to want to omit you. So I would say that the lokies are really important that way. Also to tell them that you still want the spot on the wait list. A lot of students end up ghosting us when they get on the wait list. And I would say that you should reach out if you really want to attend and tell us that you want that spot. And then I know this is the hardest, worst part, those months between January and March and April, where you're just waiting. But now is the time to enjoy the rest of senior year, to remain strong, to not give up, right? You want to sprint towards the finish line, not crawl over it. But, enjoy the rest of senior year. This is it. And then you're done with high school. And then hopefully in April and March, you'll have some really good news to celebrate.
Okay, and finally, we'll discuss tips to boost your chances of getting into your dream school.
Okay, I kind of touched upon this earlier, but planning is super, super, super important. Trying to stay organized and have a plan is crucial, because it's unlikely that you'll be applying to just one school. I mean, that can be the case, but I think it's a little rare. You're probably going to apply to a handful of schools, because it's a competitive time and you want to make sure that you increase your odds of getting into a school that you really want to go to. So to do so, you want to take advantage of all the time that you have in between your busy schedules, between classes and studying and extracurriculars, to actually take time dedicate that time to preparing your application and preparing, what you want to show the admissions counselors. That means deciding what extracurriculars to actually do, dedicating that time to studying really well to get those really good grades, taking time to study and prepare for the SATs or the ACTs. Even researching schools takes time, spending time to go online and learn all about the school on their websites, watching YouTube videos about what the schools are like or other students who have been there, or physically going out to the campuses and touring them. So all these things take a lot of time, and in a busy high school schedule, it's important to kind of pencil these things in so that it'll be easier for you to get a handle on everything. And next is to show initiative. This we have pointed out that schools want to know who you are. Schools want to know that you care. Schools want to know that you have leadership ability, that you can manage things, that you, when you have an interest in something, you really go all out. So in any way that you can show that you're a leader, that you're proactive, that you're a team player, do it. Whether you're trying out for the soccer team, or you want to kind of be the captain, or you want to show that you can be leaders of multiple clubs. If you want to start your own research on the side. There's so many ways to show that you can take initiative and take things a step further. So this is the time to really do those things, one or more, whatever you can handle.
So summer coming up, and I would say this is a really good time to lean into your interests. So don't spend the summer playing video games or hanging out with just your friends. A lot of students end up saying, but the school year was so hard, I need a break. I understand that, but I would say this is the time to get involved in all things outside of the classroom and learn about your different academic interests. So college is an exciting time because you get to learn about all the fields that you didn't even know possibly existed in high school. For me, at least, that was a very exciting part of the undergraduate years. So this is the time where you want to start building your extracurricular profile, exploring all the different majors that you could potentially be interested in, and then diving deeper into them. So like Maisha was saying, the importance of planning can't be overemphasized. So meaning the early years, we're working with students to look at all the different interests, leaning into all the things that they could potentially be really interested in. But then come junior year, hopefully you've narrowed down your interests. But if you didn't spend the time doing that, that can be really tough because then you're trying to pull together an application at the last minute and think about, well, what's the thing that makes me stand out? So meaning, what's my brand? If I were to think about, so admissions officers use shorthand terms to refer to students like I might be that Australian climber. I climbed a lot. Or, that student who is really interested in being a molecular biologist and who also is a surfer. So we use these shorthand terms to kind of refer to students. And so when you want to think about when my application is put together, what is that sort of hashtag that I have as part of my brand or as part of my application? What would they want to know about me? What's the major thing that we can take away? So it's your job as the applicant to tell us or to figure that out. Not for us to kind of weed through all the things that you send us and try to figure it out. I would say that when that happens, it takes longer to evaluate your file and there's more uncertainty and more doubt because it's not so clear. So through everything that you send us, you really want to get clear on what is it that makes me different and how can I showcase that through the materials that I choose to send to the admissions office. So in that same vein, you want to tailor your college list. I'll give you a really specific example. So at MIT, between say calculus A, B, and BC, they really would prefer for students to take Calc BC. And what they're saying to you when they say that is, calculus is the basis of all or the entire curriculum at MIT. If that's not your thing and you don't even want to take calculus, then maybe it's not the best school for you. That didn't come from me, by the way. It came from Stu Schmill, who's the director of admissions. And he really was that explicit. And I was kind of surprised. I was like, wow, he's really just being very honest about what it is that would take to survive MIT. So you really want to tailor your college list to those that match your academic standing, your values, your goals. So he was saying that his daughter didn't want to take AP Physics when she was applying senior year. And one of the colleges that she visited said, well, you really should take AP Physics. That's kind of the basis for an engineering curriculum. And she decided she didn't want to. She wanted to take AP Psych instead. So, she chose not to apply to that school. So thinking about your college list in this very specific way, and like Maisha was saying, it takes time. So you need to dig in, you need to attend the webinars, you need to attend they often have student panels where they're honest and transparent about what it is that they're looking for. So that should be your way to think, should I contort myself to fit what they're looking for? Or is this, is what I believe and what I really value something that is really important to me, so that the school doesn't make sense to my list? I thought I wanted to go there. I thought it was my number one. But then when I peeled back the layers, I'm finding that that's actually not what they're looking for, and it wouldn't fit me. So you need to make some decisions about, okay, does it sound okay for me to do what they're asking me to do? So Harvard, for example, very explicit on their website. They want 4 years of math, 4 years of a foreign language, 4 years of history. A lot of students try to negotiate when we're doing course planning with me about, oh, but I don't want to do this. And I say, that's okay, but just remember that that's ideally what they're wanting. So then you have to figure out, is that something that fits your college list? So that's how we start building a really good, solid list, is trying to figure out what your values are, what are your best interests. And it's not just about the school. Remember, it's about you ultimately and what fits you best.
Amazing. Okay, well, thank you so much for that. We've reached our Q&A. So if you have any burning questions, type them into the chat box below. You can also scan the QR code and type the questions into your phone or iPad or whatever handheld device that you have. But just to kick things off, I know we talked a lot about the interview, the alumni interview. And I know we talked a lot about how, it's super important to do, and it's a great way to kind of learn more and introduce yourself to the school. But I'm wondering if you both could share some tips on what not to do at the alumni interview.
What not to do? I'm still thinking.
I know, Julia, that's a good question. For some reason, that stumps me too. I was like, oh, what not to do?
Sorry. I mean, the immediate thing that comes to mind is what I think of, like, for any interview, like, don't show up late, be on time, don't wear sweatpants.
Those are important. And one thing I'd say is, don't pretend to be someone you're not, because they'll be able to tell. These interviewers, these volunteer interviewers will love doing this, and they're so experienced that they will know if you're kind of putting on an act. I know it's tempting to act like, I don't know, it's a super genius or like you are, I don't even know what to say when it comes to pretending, but if you feel that you're not enthusiastic or really passionate about one of the things an interviewer brings up, it's okay to tell them in return something you're more passionate about. You don't have to kind of pretend and go along and say, oh yes, this book is also my favorite book of all time, because the next question they'll ask you is, what was your favorite part? And then you're stumped. So, try to be honest to yourself and just be who you are.
I think you don't have to be perfect. I think I definitely felt like I had to be in all of my interviews. And so Harvard has a really good careers office. When I was applying for jobs and internships during the summer, they film you, which is horrible and so uncomfortable and made me squirm the whole time. However, on camera, I pretended to be what I thought the hiring committees wanted. And the moment the camera came off, I was myself again. And they basically told me that you are a far greater person when you are not pretending to be someone else. And so I would say that to students. Oh. Remember, you get to be a 17-year-old or 16-year-olds. You don't have to be fully formed human beings. You don't have to be perfect. You'll probably connect better with your interviewer when you reveal your vulnerabilities or the things that you think are your weaknesses. Often that's when I get to know students the best, is when they tell me, well, there's this thing, and they're embarrassed about it or something, but I'll find it really charming. And that, I think, is a way to connect with the person you're talking to. We're humans at the end of the day. And we also have the same weaknesses and things that we're going through. So we don't expect you to be perfect.
Oh, amazing. I love that. Question from Teresa. Do summer programs matter to admissions? Teresa, like when you say summer programs, are you talking about like summer extracurriculars or like maybe like summer pre-college programs? Could you maybe specify? I don't know if any of you maybe want to take a crack at it as is.
I'll jump in, and then Maisha, please feel free to interrupt if I'm going off course. I'll say this from the perspective of having evaluated. I was on the admissions committee for Stanford Pre-Collegiate Studies, as well as Stanford High School Summer College. Sorry, it's such a long name. I always like forget all the words in it. But basically, they're summer programs and an umbrella organization that brings high schoolers onto the Stanford campus. It doesn't matter to us per se what you do over the summer, so meaning what you go to, because not everyone can afford to come to these programs. They're often really expensive and they're residential, so that's part of the expense. We don't expect that everyone can do that. What we care about more is, what do you do with that summer experience once you've done it? You know, how do you follow up on the interests? So I taught neuroscience over the summer at these programs too, both within the US and outside of for Stanford. And I think that the most impressive things when I was on the admissions committee were not seeing the students who had come to my class or who had done those programs. It's more, they went on and did other things with the knowledge or the skills that I helped them to build during that summer program. So in my neuroscience program, I had them create a research proposal at the end. And it had to be realistic. You know, it couldn't be, I want $1 million budget to do X, Y, Z. I was like, that's not okay. That's not realistic. So a lot of students went on to enter competitions with those proposals, and they ended up winning. So I would say that's amazing. So that's what we care about more, not so much did you go to the summer program and therefore you think you have a leg up on admissions, because I'll say from being on both committees, I was the only person on both committees, and it didn't influence the decision down the line.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Pam. Question from Debbie. Will top colleges know how many ACT or ACT tests you took, even though they said you can submit your best scores?
I don't believe so. You have to submit the scores yourself, which is why it's super important to even submit the scores that you want to send at the end of the day. You have to actually submit each individual test score to each individual college that you're applying to. So if you don't submit every single round of the standardized test that you took, they should not be able to see it.
Okay, and just in general, how strict are like the SAT and ACT requirements for colleges? Like, is there a little like intake you don't necessarily meet the median requirement or whatever, or are they very strict on these requirements? I'm asking based on, you know, the fact that a lot of schools kind of rescinded the requirement and now they're bringing it back. Like, could you just talk about the importance of that?
I'll take this one first, and then Maisha, again, feel free to jump in. So the reason why a lot of schools overturn their decisions to include testing is because they often publish this range or an average, saying the 75th percentile is say 1580 and the 25th percentile is 1400. I'm making stuff up. And so students who didn't fall within that very, very narrow range felt, oh man, I'm really not competitive for the school. So I'm either not going to apply or I'm just not going to submit my scores. But the thing is, again, we're looking at context. So you might go to a school or live in an area where a 1400 is the very best score we've seen in a decade coming out of that area. And that's not your fault. And so you're at the very top of your local context, in which case we want you to submit the score because it's showing us and indicating something to us when everybody else around you is scoring, say, 1,100, but you're getting 1,400. So we very much take the local context into account. And this is why they reversed the decision about requiring testing, because students were not applying or were not submitting scores when it could have helped them when they saw these sky highs. Just scoring has kind of ceilinged out, meaning a lot of students do very, very well when they come from well-resourced areas. So it's not uncommon in really top schools to see that all the students have an average of 1540 to 1580. So that doesn't tell us much. But if you don't go to one of these very unique circumstance schools, meaning the very, very top private schools in a large urban area, then you might think, oh, I'm really not competitive. But that's not true at all. Sorry, I went off on that on a really long tangent, so you should reel me in.
No, but that's super important, actually, putting it into context, that why is this even that. So, no, keep going. That's important.
Julie, I don't even know if I answered your question, but hopefully I did.
No, honestly, you did. And it was great to learn that context and information because I didn't even know that. So it's great that even I get to take away something from this. Any last questions, guys? Keep them coming. We'll maybe wait a couple more minutes until we kind of sign off for the night.
I'll just kind of add, so Debbie, you asked a great question about how many times. It used to be, so up until I think last year or the year before, we asked how many times have you taken the test, and it's in the Common App. So that went away. And now the question actually asks, I just looked this up recently, which is why I know, because another student asked me this very same question. It says to you, the very first drop down is, how many scores would you like to submit? Because depending on the school, they either super score, so that meaning they're taking the very best scores over multiple test administrations, or you're just picking one and they say, we will take your best score from one single administration, not if you took it 10 times, what was the best out of the 10 times that you took it?
Okay. I think that's it for all the questions. Pam and Maisha, thanks again so much for coming to this webinar and really providing your expertise. It's much appreciated. I am going to be, we got another question, sorry, before I wrap things up. Question from Fred. What about SAT/GRE scores and following up with faculty and suggesting meet and greet opportunities? Or is the latter a no-no? Anyone want to take a crack at this?
I mean, I've thoughts, and again, I feel like Maisha, please feel free to jump in. I think this might be asking about two different things. So GREs are required for graduate school, not for undergrad. So Fred, I'm not sure if you're applying to graduate school when you talk about this. But at the graduate school level and applying for PhD programs is a very different process than undergrad. I did meet with faculty before I applied at the graduate level because it's a really different game. My PI knew people who they introduced me to. A PI is a principal investigator or the head of a lab, and they often have friends or colleagues that they want you to go on and train with. And so then there is, whether at conferences or otherwise, they do meet and greet you ahead of giving you a hiring decision or an acceptance decision. But in general, with the undergrad level, I would say no, you wouldn't be following up with or talking to faculty or necessarily meeting or greeting them.
Okay, super helpful to know. Thanks, Fred. I hope that answers your question. Any last questions before we wrap up? Just want to flag again, if you missed it at the beginning of the webinar, I did mention it, but if you missed it, just want to say again, we'll be sending this webinar out to all attendees tomorrow morning. So if you do want to review or if there's a question that you missed or anything like that, you'll be able to review and go back. Okay, question from Debbie. Question about summer programs. Are paid research programs worth it to apply? Example, RISE, Garcia, Michigan.
Maisha, do you want to take this one?
No, Tammy. That's all.
Oh, really? Okay, so I would say that those programs are not all in the same category. So for instance, Garcia is very prestigious. It is very specific, however, it's only for polymer engineering. So if you're into, I have had students who've attended and who were really interested in polymer engineering. So that, because it's so specific, it can show interest in an area. You're not going to find a lot of polymer engineering in a lot of summer programs. It's a really, really, I would say at the high school level, is a very niche area to be studying. And then in terms of RISE, again, it depends. So RISE has many levels, or there are 2 levels of BU RISE, and it can showcase an interest in an area. So the research program allows you to delve deep with a postdoc or PhD or faculty member into your area of interest. So I would say, I know I'm being really waffly, but yes, it can be worthwhile to apply to these programs. I also like having students apply to them because you have to write essays, and it's their first taste of why I've been telling them that they should be doing X, Y, Z, because they get to the essays and they're like, oh, I don't know how to answer this. I'm like, that's why I told you to do that thing.
Okay, amazing. Question from Cameron. What's the score that most undergrads should get to be able to get into a great school like Ivy or a little Ivy school? I guess that really depends on the school, right?
The question is for what scores undergrads should get. Does that refer to getting into a graduate school?
Cameron, do you mean what's the score that most high school students should get to be able to get into a great school? I think that's what they mean.
Okay, I mean, if that's the case, there is no, set in stone score. Like Pam was saying, it's a holistic review when it comes to applications. So it's not like, if you have this score, you're in. However, you definitely want to shoot to be towards the top of your class, like between top 2-ish, single digits % of your class, if possible, when it comes to Ivies. Of course, there can be exceptions that are made if you have other parts of your application that really stand out, but usually that's what you should aim for when it comes to GPA or your school standing.
Okay, another question. As an international student, what subjects are required to apply for engineering? Is there different requirements for international students rather than domestic students?
Marsha, do you want to take this one, or should I jump in?
I actually don't know much about international applications, so if you do, Pam, go ahead, please.
It's not about international per se, but I would say as an engineering candidate, kind of like what I was saying about MIT, they do require you to have calculus. If you're in a school curriculum where they don't provide calculus, that's not your fault. And there are students who enter MIT with Calc AB versus BC, for instance, because their schools just didn't offer it. But yes, there are required subjects, or not required, but they really would like to see physics, calculus, or math at the highest level, and then evidence of problem solving throughout your application. So meaning you didn't just do competitions, but there were other things where you applied that learning as well.
Okay, question from Fred. What about bringing background information into your application, like information about a disability, etc.?
I think that's a personal preference. If you feel that it is one of those things that highlights your lived experience, and you want to talk about it in your application, in your personal statement, sure. If you feel that you'd rather not highlight that, that's fine too. I don't think there's a preference either way. I think it's a personal choice.
I think it can also give the committee additional context. So for instance, I've read applications where there was a student who just, he couldn't really move. He was in a lot of pain, and that restricted his ability to engage in extracurriculars. So he divulged that information because he wanted us to know why he wasn't, part of school clubs. He couldn't go after school. Oftentimes he would be on the floor for months in a lot of pain. So we did admit him, But that context was really important, because if you looked at that file and you looked at that extracurricular profile, it would have looked a little bit odd. He did his best given his circumstances. So that's why this background information is really important to us in what we call, again, holistic admissions.
Okay, great. Thanks. That's helpful to know. I think that's it for questions. So I guess we'll wrap it up. I want to say thank you for joining us tonight. Like I mentioned, we'll be emailing the webinar out if you want to review. Special thanks again to our panelists. Thank you so much for your insightful questions. And we'll see everyone back for our next quad webinar sometime soon. Bye, guys. Have a good night.